It's a Tuesday morning, 7:43 a.m. You know this because you glanced at your phone, not because an alarm went off. There was no alarm. There hasn't been one in 3 years. Outside, somewhere in the neighborhood, someone is already backing out of their driveway. You can hear the car engine from your bedroom window. Whoever it is, they're probably running slightly late, probably replaying the thing they forgot to do yesterday, probably already thinking about a meeting that starts in 40 minutes that they're not ready for. You know that feeling. You lived inside it for 20 years. You don't live inside it anymore. You get up when you want to. You make coffee slowly, on purpose, without checking your phone first. You sit at the kitchen table and watch the light change through the window for a few minutes, and nobody's waiting on you to do anything, and the day ahead is yours to decide what to do with. This is what financial freedom actually feels like from the inside. Not the version you've seen in YouTube thumbnails, the yacht, the beach, the guy in sunglasses pointing at a number on a laptop screen. Just a Tuesday morning, quiet, unhurried, entirely yours. I'm going to tell you exactly how someone gets here by 45. Not the highlight reel version, the real one. With the years that nearly broke the plan, the moments of genuine doubt, the things nobody told you to expect, and the specific decisions in the right order that actually made the difference. Because the math of financial freedom isn't the hard part. The math is simple enough that I could explain it in about 4 minutes. The hard part is everything surrounding the math. The psychological battles, the setbacks that feel like failures, the years where nothing seems to be happening no matter how much you're doing right. That's the part that actually determines whether someone gets here or not. And that's what I want to talk about today. Real quick, if this video is hitting home for you already, subscribe. It lets me know you want more of this, and honestly, it's what keeps me going. Before we get into the story, I want to give you the core math. Not because it's complicated, but because everything that follows makes more sense once you have it. A financial freedom, at its most basic, rests on one idea. If your investments can generate enough money to cover your annual expenses indefinitely, without you ever needing to touch the principal, you no longer need a paycheck to live. You've essentially built a machine that pays you to exist. The math behind this is called the 4% rule, a framework developed from decades of real market data. It says that if you withdraw 4% of your investment portfolio each year, there's a very high historical probability your money will last indefinitely, even accounting for down years and inflation. That gives you what the FIRE community calls your number, the amount you need to accumulate before the machine is built. The formula is simple. Take your annual expenses and multiply by 25. That's your target. If you spend $60,000 a year, you need $1.5 million invested. If you spend $80,000, you need $2 million. If you spend $40,000, you need $1 million. The number isn't fixed, it's personal, and it moves directly with what you choose to spend, which turns out to be the most powerful lever in the entire system. Americans say they need about $1.46 million on average to retire comfortably, and that figure is rising, partly because of inflation, partly because people are living longer, and partly because uncertainty around Social Security is making everyone pad their estimate. At 45, retiring comfortably means funding potentially 40 to 50 more years of life. So the math isn't exactly the same as retiring at 65, but the mechanism is identical. You're just starting the machine earlier, which means you need it to be slightly more robust. All right, that's the math. Now let's talk about what it actually takes to get there. Meet James. James is 24, which is where this story has to start because financial freedom at 45 isn't built at 45. It's built in the 20 years leading up to it, mostly quietly, mostly without anyone around you noticing or caring. James has just started his first real job, and he's making $52,000 a year, which feels like a lot after college, and simultaneously feels like not nearly enough when he looks at rent, student loan payments, and the cost of building a life from scratch in a city where he doesn't know many people yet. He opens a 401k because his company offers a match, and matching free money feels too obvious to skip. He puts in enough to get the full match. He sets it up in the first few weeks and then, genuinely, barely thinks about it for a while. This is actually how most stories of financial freedom begin, not with a dramatic awakening or a motivational video or a moment of crystal clear intention. With something boring. An automatic contribution set up once, quietly running in the background, while life happens in the foreground. That almost forgettable first step turns out to matter more than almost anything that comes later because it means James's money starts compounding immediately. And compounding, as we've seen in other conversations, is far more powerful at the beginning of a timeline than it is at the end. Here's the part nobody makes a YouTube video about, and it's the part that ends most people's financial freedom story before it really begins. Years 2 through 5 for James look almost identical to year 1. The account grows, slowly, not dramatically. Some months the market goes up a little, some months it goes down a little. The number on the screen is still small enough that from the inside, it feels like he's doing something theoretical rather than something real. He's 26, he's 27, he's 28. He gets a raise. He increases his contributions automatically because he promised himself he would whenever his income went up. The raise doesn't really change what he's spending. He's been careful about that, not in a miserable, depriving himself kind of way, but in a I'm not going to inflate my lifestyle every single time my paycheck gets bigger kind of way. This discipline, keeping his spending growth slower than his income growth, is the actual engine behind everything. Not the investments, not the market returns. The gap between what comes in and what goes out, maintained patiently over years. He has friends who earn similar salaries and live much fuller lives, at least on the outside. Nicer apartments, newer cars, more dinners out, more vacations booked on credit cards paid off over months. His life doesn't look dramatically more restricted than theirs. He still travels, still enjoys things, still has a life worth having. But his gap is real, and theirs in many cases is not. He checks his investment account less than he probably should, actually, not out of avoidance, out of a deliberate decision not to let the short-term noise interfere with a long-term plan. He set up the contributions, he chose low-cost index funds, he decided to mostly leave it alone. This turns out to be one of the most financially valuable things he does across the entire 20 years. Not a complex tactical decision, just the discipline of not tinkering with something that's working. There's a part of James's story he doesn't talk about much. Not because he's ashamed of it, but because it's the kind of thing that, even years later, still costs something to say out loud. James is 31 when the marriage ends. It doesn't end dramatically. There's no single moment, no explosion, no obvious villain. It just ends the way a lot of things end. Slowly, then all at once, leaving him standing in an apartment that suddenly feels too big and too quiet for one person at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night. He's not thinking about his investment account that night. He's not thinking about his number or his plan or the version of himself he'd been building toward for 7 years. He's thinking about what most people think about when their life rearranges itself without their permission, how to get through the next few days, and then the few days after that. The financial damage comes later, in pieces, the way financial damage usually does. Legal fees that arrive in the mail, like weather, a settlement that takes a real, specific chunk of what he'd spent 7 careful years building. The cost of moving quickly into a new apartment, not the right apartment, just an available one, because he needed somewhere to be and didn't have the luxury of being patient about it. And then the slower, quieter cost of rebuilding a household from scratch on a single income in a city where everything costs what it costs, whether you're doing it alone or not. By the time the dust settles, James has lost roughly 2 years of carefully accumulated progress. Not because he made bad decisions in the crisis, he made the only decisions available to him. Just because life happened at full volume. And full volume life is expensive. He's 32. He sits on the floor of the new apartment one night, not a couch yet, he hasn't gotten around to it. Laptop open, a glass of whiskey on the carpet beside him, running the updated projection of when he'll reach his number. The new date is further away than the old one. Not catastrophically further, just far enough that it stops feeling like something he can see clearly and starts feeling like something on the other side of a fog. This is the night he comes closest to quitting. And I want to be specific about what quitting would have looked like for James, because it wouldn't have looked the way quitting looks in movies. It wouldn't have been a dramatic decision, a speech to himself in a mirror, a formal moment of surrender. It would have been something much quieter and much more common. Redirecting the automatic contribution just this month because things are tight. Telling himself he'd restart once things stabilized. letting the plan drift into the background of a life that had more urgent things in the foreground. Most people who stop building financial freedom don't decide to stop. They just keep finding reasonable, sympathetic, completely understandable reasons to pause. Until the pauses become the pattern. James doesn't pause. Not because he's made of something different than other people, but because somewhere in the middle of that night, sitting on the floor with his updated spreadsheet and his whiskey, he makes one decision. Not a grand one, not an inspiring one, just a practical one. The contributions stay running. Whatever else has to adjust, whatever else has to wait, the contributions stay running. He doesn't touch the investments. He rebuilds the household budget line by line more carefully than he ever had before, because now it's just him and there's nobody to catch the things he misses. He finds room he didn't know was there. Not a lot of room, enough. And slowly, in the way that slow things work, without announcement, without a moment you can point to, that the trajectory resets. 2 years later, at 34, he's back to where he would have been without the disruption. 4 real years elapsed. 2 years of net progress lost, then rebuilt, one automatic contribution at a time. He doesn't celebrate it. There's nothing to celebrate exactly. He's just back to where he was supposed to be. But there's something else in the account that wasn't there before. Something the numbers don't show directly. The knowledge that he already survived the thing that was supposed to break the plan. That the plan bent and bent badly and didn't break. That knowledge turns out to be worth something. Something the account balance, at this point, has also started doing for the first time. It's growing faster than he's contributing to it. The returns in good years are beginning to outpace his own deposits. The compounding he was told about years ago, the thing that always sounded theoretical, like something that happened to other people in other timelines, has started to feel, quietly and undeniably, like something that is happening to him. Here's what the financial freedom journey looks like from the outside, from a time-lapse perspective. Nothing, 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 something, something, more, dramatically more. The back half of James's journey doesn't look anything like the front half because the math of compounding doesn't grow in a straight line. It curves upward, slowly at first, then steeply, then in ways that start to feel almost implausible. At 35, James is earning considerably more than he was at 24. 2 promotions, a job change that increased his salary meaningfully, and several years of steady raises. The percentage of income he saves has stayed roughly constant, around 30 to 35%, which means the absolute dollar amount going into investments has grown substantially alongside his income. He's also made a decision around this time that accelerates everything. He opens a taxable brokerage account alongside his 401k and Roth IRA, because he's now running into contribution limits on his tax-advantaged accounts and wants to keep building beyond them. He continues buying low-cost total market index funds, the same strategy he's been using since the beginning, because it keeps working and there's no particular reason to complicate it. His number, the amount he needs to never need a paycheck again, is $1.5 million, based on his spending. He calculated it carefully, adjusted it for the kind of life he wants to live after 45, and has been tracking his progress toward it for several years. At 38, he crosses the halfway point. The first $750,000 took 14 years. The math suggests the second $750,000 will take considerably less because there's now a much larger base of capital generating returns. The curve is bending. At 40, he crosses $1.1 million. His investment returns in a single good year now exceed what he earned in his first full year of working. This fact, the first time he really sits with it, is genuinely disorienting. The machine he's been building is generating more money in 12 months than he used to spend a year working to produce. It's not a feeling he expected to have. At 43, he's at $1.4 million. He's close enough now that he can see it clearly. Not as an abstraction, but as a real, specific, near-term outcome. He starts planning in earnest. The healthcare gap before Medicare eligibility at 65, the withdrawal strategy that minimizes taxes in early retirement, the Roth conversion ladder that lets him access retirement account funds before 59 and a half without penalty. These are real specific problems to solve, and solving them becomes interesting rather than intimidating because the finish line is visible. At 45 on a Thursday in March, his balance crosses $1.5 million. He doesn't do anything dramatic. He's at his desk when it happens. He looks at the number for a long moment. He makes a cup of coffee, he goes for a walk, he calls his brother. The milestone feels quieter than he expected, honestly. The work was all in the years before this one. The arrival is just a number finally matching a target. 6 weeks later, he puts in his notice. Here's the section that almost no video about financial freedom ever includes, and it's the one that matters most to people who are actually on this path, because arriving isn't the same as having figured it out. The first few months after James stops working are stranger than he expected. He doesn't feel like he's on a permanent vacation because a vacation has an end date, and this doesn't. He has to figure out from scratch what his days are for, not in a I'll travel and relax sense, but in a deeper, what is the structure of a meaningful life when you've removed the structure that used to hold everything together sense. Work, it turns out, wasn't just a source of income. It was also a source of identity, social connection, daily purpose, and the feeling of being useful in a legible way. Without it, those things don't automatically fill themselves in. You have to build them deliberately. He also deals with something he didn't expect from people around him, a kind of low-level discomfort from some of them, not hostility exactly, but a subtle awkwardness that comes from being around someone who has stepped off the treadmill everyone else is still on. Some friendships, built around shared professional stress and workplace commiseration, quietly recede because that shared context is simply gone. This is the part nobody makes the thumbnail about. But it's real, and it's worth saying because understanding it beforehand makes it considerably easier to navigate when it arrives. James also finds himself thinking about a word he'd used for years without really interrogating it: freedom. What he'd been pursuing was freedom from the alarm, from the meeting, from the paycheck dependency, from the Monday dread. What he finds himself building in the years after 45 is freedom to choose the work he actually wants to do, to be present in his relationships in ways a full-time job never allowed, to pursue things that don't pay anything because they don't need to. The second kind of freedom turns out to be richer than the first kind, but you can't really access the second without first securing the first. So here's the actual sequence, the way it worked for James, and the way it tends to work for the people who actually reach this milestone, not as a checklist, but as a realistic understanding of the phases and what each one actually requires. The first phase is starting early and automating everything. This isn't exciting, and that's the point. The automation does the work when motivation fails, which it will for everyone, repeatedly, across 20 years. James didn't feel motivated to invest every single month for 2 decades. He didn't have to because the system ran without him. Automate contributions to your 401k up to at least the employer match, then automate a Roth IRA contribution to the annual limit if your income qualifies, and if there's anything left after that, automate a taxable brokerage contribution. Set it. Revisit it once a year to increase it when your income grows. Otherwise, leave it alone. The second phase is keeping the gap between income and spending protected as your income rises. This is where most people quietly derail, not through dramatic failures, but through lifestyle inflation. Every raise producing a proportionally more expensive life until the gap that was doing all the financial work has gradually been spent away. The gap is the engine. The investments are just where the engine sends its output. The third phase is surviving the setbacks without abandoning the plan. Not avoiding them. They're unavoidable. James had a divorce. Other people have medical events, job losses, market crashes that erase years of gains on paper overnight. The people who reach financial freedom aren't people who avoided these things. They're people who stayed in the market through the crashes, rebuilt the contributions after the setbacks, and refused to let the word restart mean the same thing as failure. The fourth phase is the acceleration. The back half of the journey where the compounding the math always promised starts to feel undeniably real. This phase requires less from you than the early ones in some ways. The hard work of building the habit, surviving the setbacks, and protecting the gap is already behind you. The machine is running. The main job is not to interfere with it. And the fifth phase, the one that gets almost no attention, is building the life you want to step into with the same deliberateness you brought to building the financial machine that makes it possible. The financial number is necessary, but not sufficient. Knowing what you're building toward, not just what you're building away from, turns out to matter more than almost any single financial decision in the years before you get there. Now, here's where this leaves you. You're somewhere in James's story right now. Maybe you're at the beginning where nothing seems to be happening. Maybe you're in the middle where a setback has shaken the plan but hasn't ended it. Or maybe you're closer to the end than you think. The machine you're trying to build is simpler than the financial industry wants you to believe it is. Low-cost index funds, consistent contributions, a protected gap between income and spending, and time. Genuinely enough time. Not skipped, not borrowed against, just given to the process. The hard part isn't understanding that. The hard part is living inside it for 20 years, during the decades when the returns feel invisible, when life keeps throwing things at the plan, when every culture signal around you is pointing towards spending the gap instead of protecting it. The people who eventually get to that quiet Tuesday morning, coffee in hand, no alarm, sunlight pouring through the window, aren't different from you. They simply stayed committed when there was no applause, no instant reward, and no obvious sign they were making progress. They kept going through the years when the right thing to do felt like the most boring thing they could possibly be doing. That's the whole secret. It's boring and it's hard and it works. And 10 years from now, on a Thursday in some month that doesn't matter, the number will cross the line quietly while you're probably doing something else entirely. And the rest of your life will be yours to decide what to do with.